Designer with Chalk Couture with some St. Patrick's Day projects. Our first project. Here are the materials. I have one of our newest transfers, Irish Kisses, a easel chalkboard stand that I picked up somewhere, and country patterns or country plaid. So first we prep our transfers. We turn them over, and on the back we write what they are. And the reason we do this is twofold for me. One, so that we know which backers go on which transfers, because sometimes we have transfers from several different sets, and a lot of times the backers will be similar size. This just helps us to know which one goes back on each transfer, because our transfers are reusable. They're self-sticking and reusable. You can use them many times as long as you take care of them very well, which I will tell you how to do in this video. So I'm in the process now of just cutting apart one of the transfer sets so that I can use the individual pieces, writing on the back what they are. For me, that also helps me put the transfer back on the correct side of the backer. The side the transfers go on is glossy. The other side is just paper, and I'm notorious for not paying attention and putting them on the wrong side, and then they stick a little more than I want them to. So I'm almost done there, and we'll be going on to the next step, which is prepping our transfer to put onto the surface. Now, because they are self-sticking, at the beginning, they are very sticky, and we don't want them to stick to the surface that much. So I should have cut this transfer into smaller pieces. You'll see I have a little bit of trouble later on because I didn't do that. But I wanted to use it for something else that was larger, and so I did not. So what I'm doing now is getting some lint from our fuzzing cloth. You can use a towel. You can use your pant leg, except for something this big. And we're getting a little bit of lint on it so that it doesn't stick to the surface quite as much. We want that sticky so we can use the transfer over and over, but we don't necessarily want it on the individual products. It can pull up paint on a painted surface. It can even pull up the chalk paste. And once I get it fuzzed, then we start to put it onto the surface. So now it's time to chalk. Now you'll see I'm having a little bit of trouble getting it to stick, and it's not the transfer's fault. I really, as I said earlier, should have cut this in pieces. Found out later that I had already ordered this transfer, so I could have used this one to cut into pieces for smaller projects. But it's trying to, because it's still hooked to the backer with the rest of the transfer, it's trying to pull it up. And so I'm trying all kinds of ways to get it to stick. But like I say, not the transfer's problem, it was my fault. So we'll just watch me continue to have problems and try to figure out how to get it to stick until I finally just decide to hold it down and get going. This is like putting the painter's tape up before you paint. I hate that part. I like to get to the fun part where you make it look pretty. My goodness, how long did I struggle with this? If I was good at editing, I would have edited out part of this. Okay, I'm ready to start chalking. That is chalk paste. It's a little bit thicker than paint. We want it about the consistency of yogurt or cake batter. We can use distilled water to thin it down if it starts to thicken, because it being chalk paste, it does start to dry out, and all we need to do is thin it down. We use distilled water because tap water can have things in it that could cause the paste to mildew or mold. So all I'm doing is just spreading it over the design and working it through until I see that pattern coming up through the white chalk paste. And then I know I've got it covered. I don't want to see any of that black from the from the chalkboard surface. And I'm using the mini squeegee just because I have small hands, but there is a little bit larger one that probably would do this job a lot faster. But I just have tiny hands, and so I feel more comfortable with the small one. So I'm almost done spreading it all over. Got a little bit more to do. See, I'm having to hold that one section down because it's wanting to pull up, so it's not sticking. All right, now I'm almost done, and what I'm going to do next is wipe off any extra chalk paste, and I just put it right back into the jar. We don't have to waste anything. I pull the transfer up. I try not to do it from a corner, but from a middle, so that it doesn't distort the transfer and have the design kind of messed up for next time. Now I'll put that aside, and I'll take that and clean it up later. So now I actually put the words, I think it says, "Oh Kisses," or Irish Kisses. I put them on the board itself, but they just didn't show up very well against I loved that black and white pattern, but it was a little too busy. So I took a little board that I had, painted it white, and now I'm putting the wording there, and I'm going to just put that onto the blackboard. Give it a little 3D effect, which is kind of cool. So I'm just using my I think it's Meadow is the color that I'm using there. And again, I'm just spreading that on and working it through until the design shows through the chalk paste. And all of the white, because now the background is white, all of the white is covered. This went much faster, didn't it? No problems with it sticking this time. I'm going to wipe off the extra, put it back in the jar, and reveal the finished product. I'll put that aside. I'll show you with that one later. I think that's the one that I have that I'm going to show you how we wash them. And then I've got these pop-up adhesives from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to put those on the back of the sign. I'm going to be holding the sign awkwardly while I'm doing that because I didn't want to wait for the chalk paste to dry. It only takes a few minutes, but I was in a hurry to finally get this project done. I had to paint my whiteboard several times, so I had to wait quite a while before I could go to this step. So I'm just peeling off the backer and then getting the pop-up dot, I think they call it, the sticky on both sides. I'm putting 4 of them on across that board just to make sure that it stays on really well. And then I will be ready to put this up for display in my living room. I'm in a very Irish community, so it's always nice to decorate for St. Patrick's Day. Almost done here. It was a little awkward holding the board and not touching it so that I didn't mess up the chalk paste. Then I'm just going to stick that right there. And I am done. I thought it turned out really cute. Hopefully I get it up there so you can see it. Kind of. All right, so that is the end of project number 1. And this, I guess I'm showing you project 2 before we make it. It says Irish Kisses 25 cents if you can't read that up close. I think, okay, there we go. Second project, I used the Ombre technique where we blend. I only did 2 colors. You can do as many colors as you want, but I did 2. So I just had a piece of a scrap wood that my husband had given me. It was already finished, had kind of a glossy surface. And so I'm now fuzzing my transfer so that it doesn't stick to that surface. I don't think it would pull up any varnish or anything, but you never know. Now I'm going to put it onto the surface. And I want to make sure all air bubbles are out around the silk screen. That teal portion is just the transfer itself, and I don't think I told you before, our transfers are silk screen. So a lot of times we can have little designs within the stencil itself. I'm going to take, this is our shimmer, oh man, now I forget the color. It's a shimmer green, and I'm only going to do the top half. I'm going to leave it on, not super thick, but not really thin, so that when I do the ombre, it will blend. So I'm just doing that top portion. I'm going to leave a gap between that and the next color. So I'm going to turn the design around so that you can see, and my hand hopefully won't be in your way. And I'm going to now do the lower half, leaving just a small gap between the 2 colors. Wasn't that nice of me to show you the gap? I never know what you can see clearly with the video. So I always want to try to make sure that you can see. All right, so now I've got the paste on. What I'm going to do is just get my fingers just a little damp. I don't want them really wet. So I'm just spraying some water on, and then I dotted it off on a paper towel. Just want it a little bit wet, and then I'm going to blend those colors. If I get my finger too wet, it will blur. It'll kind of go under, even though it's self-sticking, it will tend to go under there if it's too liquid. So I'm just blending those colors together where they meet, getting it off my hand so I don't get it everywhere else. And then I'm going to lift the transfer up. I had a little bit of trouble catching that one side, so I gave up. And pulling it up. Now you can see, in person you can see, oh yeah, you can see the words, okay. I can't get it in camera frame so you can see the whole thing, but you can see that ombre effect. It's one of my favorite techniques. Now, taking care of our paste, I talked before about that it is chalk paste so it can dry out. So the first thing we do, we wipe along the edge of the bottle or the jar just to get anything off so that we have a real good seal. I spritz a little bit of distilled water so that it doesn't dry out, and then I screw the lid on very tightly. If we don't wipe the edge, you might have a little bit of chalk paste that can make it so that it doesn't seal. Cleanup time is a breeze. All we do is take it to the sink. The idea is to get the sticky side wet first so it doesn't stick to anything. And then that's a board eraser I'm using. You can use your hand. You can use a sponge as long as it's not falling apart. Our board erasers work really well. They tend to get most of that pigment off so that the transfer isn't stained. It doesn't affect the usability of the transfer if they're stained. They just don't look as nice. So I'm washing both sides, getting any chalk paste that's on the other side, plus all of that lint that we put onto the transfer. Rinse it out really well, and then I put it sticky side up to dry. When it's dry, I just put the backer back on. And there are the projects. That's how easy it is. Those projects, except for the painting of the board, those projects don't take very long at all. In fact,